All right, everyone, we are back with the announcers hour yet again, and today's guest is Andrew Klein, another guy that was down there in the University of Miami circuit with me and also called games at WVUM, was involved with UMTV and so much more. Andrew, how you doing today?
I'm good. I'm doing well.
And can you just introduce yourself a little bit to those that are unfamiliar out there and just go ahead and explain, kind of the things you've done?
Yeah, so I'm Andrew. I am from Westchester, New York. Went to the University of Miami, of course, with Patrick. Broadcasted for WVUM, was part of UMTV on the sports and the news side. So I've done a little bit of everything. At the end of the day, I want to be in TV, somewhere in sports TV, however that may be, and just looking to take it day by day.
Right. And what have you, kind of been up to recently? How did it feel to graduate down there from Miami?
Yeah, it was great. Definitely accomplishment, some happy, some sad. Nice to finally graduate and, be able to get into the real world, but also that sad factor of, leaving behind something that has meant a lot to me. Both UMTV, WVUM have been pretty integral part of my college experience throughout the 3 years that I was a part of each organization. So, that part of it was definitely, a little bit more sad than happy to leave those spots, but I know that they've definitely helped me throughout my career so far, albeit not very much of a career yet.
Right. And by the way, did you catch up with Daryl at all, like right at that last moment? Because I don't know when they had when he was given the award for the Jim Nance Award, but like, or if when he would figure out he would be the winner. But did you get to talk to him? I guess in the final moments there and
I
then.
haven't I haven't spoke to him in person. I texted with him. I actually funny enough, the first day of the semester that I saw him in the fall this past year, I looked at him. I was like, "Hey, Daryl, you gonna win the Jim Nance Award?" He's like, "I don't know." I said, "You probably will. Let's be real. The kid is. I mean, it's insane. He's a fantastic editor, as good as it gets."
Yeah, he really is. And again, that's the Jim Nance Award for those that are a little unfamiliar. But Daryl Barnes, if you haven't seen him already, you'll probably see him on like TNT or something really soon doing NBA like he was. So, but on you specifically, I guess, are there things I know you called a lot with WVUM. What was the last game that you got to do down there with the 90.5?
I did the last game of the Pitt series. So I did two games of Pitt, and the last one I did was the last game.
And do you remember like the final moment there when you signed off?
I can't tell you the specifics, it was very meaningful to do the game with Nick. He's one of my absolute best friends from Miami, and it really meant a lot to me to do it with him. I knew he was going off to the ACC tournament as well, so kind of a little send off for him. That was the big thing. Like I got to do it with a lot of people that I really enjoyed being around, both in the booth and outside the booth, and leaving that behind was definitely sad. I know I was able to say some final parting words to the airwaves of WVUM. That station has really made a profound impact on not only my college career, but my entire life.
I was gonna say the end comes like quicker than you can realize, and that
Oh
certainly was the
yeah.
case for me. But you did a ton of TV work, maybe more than anyone else, like at WVM. That I'm thinking about it. And so, what made you want to get more into that, and what have you learned like in being able to do play-by-play and television?
Man, I honestly don't really know the exact thing that it was. I just kind of clicked with TV, I guess. Being able to do both for a long time was just fantastic. I think that's one of the best parts about the University of Miami. If anybody's listening, considering, a Miami or a Syracuse, I would go to Miami. The opportunity is there. And that's really what the big thing was I had a lot of opportunities, that I was able to have both in sports, in news, doing anchoring, doing, more studio TV reporting and segments and things like that. So I don't know. I just kind of naturally was like, oh, I woke up, I realized one day, I don't want to do play-by-play every day. It's just not my thing. I love doing it, but it's not something I saw myself doing every day for the rest of my life. TV, on the other hand, it just kind of feels right when I do it. I sacrificed a lot of game opportunities this past year, especially this past semester, to be able to be on my shows for TV. I can't tell you an exact reason why that is. It just is something that I needed to do for me, and is just really changed my life being in UMTV. It's really shown me exactly what I want to do in the future.
And what would be the, I guess, ideal like position for you in television? Would you want to just stick to like the New York market being from there?
I mean, if I could have one job that no matter what, I would not say no to, it would be Red Zone where Scott Hansen is. I think that's the coolest job in the entire world.
Yeah, that is a special thing to take over. The red zone would be absolutely nuts. I mean, the thing is like, yeah, going off the sports, are you more because you did, I know, NewsVision, like would you be good with politics or do you want to stick mostly to sports like when you're on television?
So I'm actually starting in news. I'm starting in Harrisburg next month or in September, so a little over next month. But and I'm starting in news as an MMJ. There is not even a sports segment, sports section at all in the station that I'm going to be in. So, definitely to start, I think news will be where I am. Probably first contract for sure. Obviously, that's already signed and done. Maybe my second, depending on what the position is. But later down the line, I want to switch to sports. I know in my heart I want to cover sports. If I, am a few years in and realize that that's not what I want, then I'll go down a different path. But if I could tell you the, kind of baseline of what I think I'm gonna have, it's start in news, do news for a little bit. I don't hate doing news. It just doesn't drive me the way sports do.
Yeah, and I think this is where you're a great guest to have on, especially because I know a lot of our guests in the past so far for this podcast, I know talked about really sticking to play-by-play, but I know your television aspirations that adds like a whole new element to it and gives us a whole breath of fresh air in terms of, everything can get done in broadcasting. And so wondering too, like with your background in television, how did that impact you when you're on the mic doing just, pure radio and or calling a game?
That's a great question, actually. I think it just gave me a deeper understanding of the sport. Watching it and doing play-by-play is one thing, and going back and really analyzing a sport is another thing. I think that's the toughest thing about being, a college broadcaster is I'm not a professional athlete, I'm not a college athlete, so I'm not naturally, we do a lot of color commentary in WVUM. Obviously we split play-by-play and color. Color is tough. Color is very like TV. So it's forced me to, kind of look at the game deeper. I watch a lot of ESPN. I know people don't like ESPN, but I like listening to the professional athletes talk because they obviously, I don't know more about basketball than JJ Redick. I don't know more about football than Dan Orlovsky. So these are people that I can take information from and use it in my own ways. And I was able to do that, I think, in TV. Gave me a better understanding of our football program when in the fall. That's what I was mainly able to cover. And then, our baseball team in the spring as well. I was able to be side by side. So I always needed to update my stats and keep things going, keep tabs on the team because who knows, maybe I'll be broadcasting next weekend. And at the same time, I needed to really see what differences the team could make or what changes they could make or what they were doing well and be able to portray that to another audience in a visual way. It's much different, obviously, when, I can turn and go to a video wall and show this one or two things, but obviously on the radio side, you can't do that. So I think that's another thing that has allowed me to really be open and has benefited both is just the more you do, the more you're going to know, the more you'll be able to put to whatever you want to do in the future.
Yeah, that's a great point. And do you have like I guess a way for approaching things because if you're going to do a sports story on television, you're going to have to do a whole list of different things and preparing for a game and play by play. So when it comes to telling stories, which a lot of people try to do on both ends, like play by play and television, like if you're going to cover, let's say a baseball game, and you're getting, let's say if you're going to get a package out of that for television and you're going to announce that game, how do you approach the storytelling differently when you have to cover it for TV and you have got to announce the game?
Well, it's really nice. I think the clearest example I have of this is I did a package on Jasmine Roberts about a year and a half, 2 years ago almost, and I also broadcasted a lot of her basketball games. Jasmine Roberts, Miami basketball player on the women's side, and it just gave me more background knowledge. You can only read so much. They only give you so much in those game notes, in those player notes on every team's website. But that allowed me to have a deeper understanding of who she is as a person and B, just see her and talk to her face to face. So much different when you read a story and tell a quote. That's what we should do a lot of times. Don't get me wrong. Read a story. If you see a big story about a baseball player, you want to read that so you know what you could say about him in the game the next day or 2 days later, whatever it may be. But getting to speak to some of those athletes personally, it just shows you the journey they've been on, how much it means to them, what their sport means to them, and you just get a better feel for them as a person. I think that's the biggest thing about being a good storyteller is you got to have that personability, and being able to talk to the athletes just made it a whole nother level of connection that you don't get when you just watch.
Yeah, and Andrew, I know you've been on a ton of the road trips as well, like with the women's team and then the baseball team, and a lot of people do not understand like the amount of I'm getting this like right now with Ridgefield, don't understand how much you don't report and or goes unseen or uncovered, whether that's like positive or negative stuff behind the scenes. But in saying that, I mean, how do you balance and figure out what you're gonna like include in a television set or package or segment and or play-by-play, and then what you're not going to include from getting to know all these athletes like really personally behind the scenes.
I mean, it's the biggest thing is, you could tell the same thing. If you prep for a baseball game, maybe you'll use like 3 or 4 of the things that you prep on, and each team has what, 25 players, 50 players in college, probably way more than what I'm even, thinking. And you got to read about these players, you got to write about all these players, and you just are not going to use it. I mean, just flat out. I have so much prep over the last 3 years that I did and I didn't use. When I was in Indiana, I scrambled till 2 in the morning doing prep on the women's basketball team, and I may have said 3 sentences because you get locked in on the game. And that's one of the tough things is like you prep so much for these games, and then you watch the game, you analyze the game, and you don't really think about that stuff you did in the past. You're just looking for numbers. That's the big thing for me was, you have to over prep. You have to know you're going to over prep. That's what it is. You have to know that you're going to over prepare because you always will. If you under prepare, you're going to be screwed. It's just going to end up happening. It's kind of one of those things where you'd rather have all that prep and not need it than need all that prep and not have it. Just adds that other like layer, that inkling. And it's the same thing with TV. You got to add TV is more specific because you only get maybe 3 minutes max on a package. And out of those 3 minutes, you're probably only doing voiceover for a minute and a half ish. So you need to be able to tell their story, have them in the right quotes tell their story as well. And of course, you need that second, that third interview to also add to their story in a different way, in a different voice. So with TV, you're always going to over prep too because you're going to have a 20-minute interview and you're going to use maybe 20 seconds of it if it's a coach or a secondary person. You got to know that, you got to accept that, and whatever you don't use, it still can be utilized. If you go into a TV segment and you have this 25-minute interview with a coach and you only use 30 seconds of it, who's stopping you from saying, Coach still said this to me or the other day, or she liked this about that? Whatever that may be. You're always going to over prep, and there always is a way to use it. You just can't force it.
That makes sense. And by the way, when you were cutting things down, for television, basically shortening that attention span, cutting down the interviews, do you have any tactics that you like to have, or in terms of like if you're going into an interview, are there buzzwords almost like key segments you're looking to have covered or you want to include in your package, or for example, beforehand so that it makes it a little bit easier in the editing process or looking back?
So it's interesting. When I first started, would come up with a list of interview questions. And as I kind of grew through the program, I started coming up with interview topics. And I think that's helped me guide interviews a lot better because, if I have a list of questions, everything is very specific. It's gonna go one direction, and then you're gonna be limited. From topics, you can ask a number of questions on one thing. I always do everything by hand. I don't like doing things on my phone. I'll do it at the bare, at the maximum, I'll do it on my iPad and I have the pencil so I can, take notes. I'm old school. I like to write everything by hand because I can write down, 3 or 4 word quote. If I hear you talking about something that I know could go in the package, I'm gonna write it down, 2 or 3 words that you say under that topic so that I know this is where I need to find this quote because they said something I really liked. The other part of it is just the transcription thing on Premiere, that is your best friend. You can jump exactly to where you need to go, especially if you write down things, you can just search and control F or whatever it is on Premiere. So that's awesome. I mean, it just makes life so much easier, but just keeping tabs on everything, being very mindful, being aware when you're in the interview. Don't jump too far ahead. It's one of my problems is I'll kind of jump far ahead in my mind and think about what I'm going to say next so early that the person will tell me something important and it may kind of go over my head that first time. So, just be very present is big. Use that transcription factor on Premiere, and if you have a few words that you really like, nobody is stopping you from writing those down and just putting them to mind for the future.
One of the cool things that I know you've been able to do and some others, like you interview on TV, obviously for a television package, if it's not live, you've got a little more freedom, but then you've also done real live interviews on radio, like for WVUM. And so that's two kind of different mediums in a way, but not only that, as far as the timing, like you might get a few minutes and you don't know which way it's going to go on a live interview. So how are you handling interviewing for television or maybe a segment where you've got some time and then interviewing for like you get 3 minutes with Katie Meyer after the game? How do you approach those?
If it's Katie Meyer, you got to be really careful. Don't say anything negative because she will get on you. She got on me a few times. That's another good question because it really is different. But it's also the same. You gotta have those talking points that you like. We usually get a stat sheet at the end, especially in basketball. We always get that stat sheet right at the end. And then as Katie Meyer's walking over, you can look at the stat sheet, see what you think is good and maybe circle one or two things or write down one or two things that you saw. Jasmine Roberts had 5 steals. Like what do you think of her defensive effort? You can just see that quick and you circle the steals and boom, there's your question right away. It's just a lot more on the fly. You need to be ready to switch your topic entirely more on the fly. Like in TV, when you're sitting down, when there's no real time limit, you can kind of make your way through those different topics and there's a better way to get to every talking point. But on the contrary, when it's radio and you have 3 or 4 minutes with a player or Katie Meyer or whoever it may be, for example, you gotta ask those three most important questions no matter what.
Yeah, so and would you ultimately say that 'cause it sounds like you're just getting to the most important questions like off the rip on radio, and then like once you're on TV, if you have a longer interview segment, you might ask some of that other stuff that you'd want to get to.
Yeah, you can add those little tidbits because you have time to collect them in TV more so than you do in radio. If I ask Katie Meyer a little thing about one person having 2 offensive rebounds and playing some good defense, it's much harder for me to pick the important thing, which is Miami just beat a ranked team at home, or Miami just did this or that, whatever it is that is really the outstanding thing. Because it's important to have those little tidbits in radio, but you just don't have enough time to figure all of them out. And at that point, hopefully, Katie Meyer will react to my question and go into those little things that I wanted to ask her about anyway.
Yeah, it's great. I know Rich Hollenberg I had on kind of a few episodes back talked about the importance of keeping things like more simple and stupid is what he calls it, and also basically just prioritizing that most important thing, which kind of follows that inverted pyramid, the sense that you have in media with like writing and everything too, is just putting the most important things at the top. So for anyone out there who's interviewing people and stuff like that, always probably want to stick to the important stuff first and make sure those are in. But building off that point, I mean, do you have any crazy stories? Because you get to tell a lot on TV with traveling with, Miami's women's basketball team or the baseball team and or any other team you've been with, like the Crush, for example.
Crazy stories. I mean, look, the Crush had a few bad rainouts. We drove 2 hours, sat in a bus for 4 hours, and drove 2 hours home without throwing a single pitch. That was fun. That was actually terrible. Oh my God. That was like the worst day ever. It was just one of those terrible summer days where you just sit there and do nothing and just hope you're gonna play. And then after 2 hours on the bus, you just hope you can go home. I think the biggest thing, as I said, Katie Myers called me out a few times. I remember I did a Zoom interview with her. I was writing for the Hurricane, and it was right after a win, and they were coming off a loss on the road, and then they won that game at home. And I asked her, like, how do you feel about the win coming off the loss from the other day? And no hesitation. She was like, "What are you talking about the loss? Like, come on, like, don't talk about the loss. Like, that's all negative. We keep that in the past. I don't want to talk about any of that. Like, don't ask me about a loss. Ask me about the win. Ask me about what happened today, not in the past." And Homan, like, it changed my outlook on games. I changed my, knowledge of how to interview Katie Meyer, which if you went to Miami in the last however many years she was there, what 16, 17 years she was there, you better freaking know how to interview Katie Meyer because she will call you out and she will walk away. Um, so that was a fun one, honestly. I when she retired, I wanted to go tell her that story. She was kind of packed with people, obviously a million people there to see Katie Meyer when she left, but that one definitely stuck with me for sure. Was Katie Meyer calling me out? No hesitation whatsoever. We didn't even know each other at all. She was just, nope, I don't want to hear that.
Yeah, that's funny though, because like I know Katie Meyer will get tough. I think one time, like I was in the middle of setting up a question about how the team had done better with the turnovers and the win that I was getting the post game for, and it was like one of my last questions. She was like, "Out, enough with the turnovers. We're glad to get a win," and recapped it and then walked off. So you got to understand that. I mean,
That's Katie
she
Meyer.
has such a great heart though, and her heart's in the right place. But just
Oh yeah,
kind of almost similar to Greg Popovich, if I can make a comparison there, like in terms of her coaching style and how she's tough on players, but really likes them at the same time. So she's a lot of fun. But for your prep process, I mean, you obviously with a TV background and in radio, you've done play-by-play. What are the kind of differences there for your television responsibilities and play-by-play, and like how do you prepare for a day or a game?
so it's a lot more prep for radio than TV because you just have more time. And it goes back to what I was talking about a little while ago, where if you're doing a game, you need to know 50 plus players. If you're doing a 3 minute TV segment, you can't talk about the fourth guy out of the bullpen. You got to talk about the stars. So, like, for example, Florida. Florida's a great team, top to bottom. They have great hitting. They have Caglione, obviously, or had Caglione, and that whole lot, Shelton, Shellnut, all these guys that are absolute studs, top to bottom. And then they've got great pitching staff. Peterson, Neely coming out of the bullpen. And, like, in radio, I had to know everything about these guys. For TV, it was much more limited. I got 3 minutes, and out of those 3 minutes, I'm only talking for a minute 45 or so. So I need to pick out the very most important things, why Caglione is so successful, what makes him so talented, what he did to Miami last year. Boom, boom, boom. That's a minute. And now I have 45 seconds to fill on what? Shelton, Shellnut, all these other players that they have on their roster, Heyman, all these guys are studs still. They deserve as much talk as the other guys. So that balance is so much different as you just need to pick out the most important things for TV, display those, get those out. Then radio, you could trickle those things in. I'm able to kind of talk more about a reliever that I think is pitching well or that looks really good on the mound. And I'm able to really get in depth of why Luke Heyman is a great hitter in a radio opportunity. So just don't have as much time. It's really the big thing in TV versus radio, which is funny because it's the exact opposite in the interviewing. TV interviews you might have 25 minutes and radio interviews might have three, and then the other way around. Radio you might have 25 minutes in an inning, and TV you might have three for a segment.
Yeah, and over the course of a few years, like how much do you think you've learned or changed your prep process from what it was, and like what are just some of the things that you kind of learned that were really made a big difference in your broadcasting and style?
I learned that I always have way more than I need. But I just learned to figure out the most important things to focus in on. What stats are gonna really be eye-opening and game-changing that if somebody hears them, they're like, whoa, he's doing what? And then they tune in, they really want to listen, they want to hear how this guy's gonna do. Um, I just doing it, you just learn, you get better, you get a feel for how you prep. Everybody preps their own way. It's completely everybody does it different. And the important thing is that you have your own style, you dictate how you prep, and that allows you to call the game the way you want to call the game. If you prep the same way as somebody else and you use their prep, you're gonna naturally probably sound like them or take to those, tendencies. You don't want that. Everybody's got to be original. If you're not original, you're not gonna make it in this market, in this field.
Yeah, they always say, I've heard a lot of people like it, whether they're announcers or also like in, media say probably just try to be yourself rather than mimic another person because the audience will pick up on that and it might not sound as great. But, um, sticking to you, New York, because I know you're there right now, going like back a little bit. Did you have any announcers there or really anywhere else that you looked up to and or television personalities or anybody in radio?
Just watching ESPN, stuff like that. Nobody I really knew personally. I didn't have a TV program or radio program or any really notable alumni from my high school who came back and did things. So this was kind of all me and realizing that this is what I wanted to do and really going for it more than having somebody who pushed my interest that way.
Yeah, it makes sense. Did you have like a certain time, like early on in your life, where you figured out it was what you wanted to do, or was it later on?
Uh, I probably was in like 10th or 11th grade when I realized I wanted to do something in sports. Honestly, I love this story. I used to play like Madden and 2K and then MLB The Show, and I would literally just sit in the room and broadcast the game out loud. I would do a play-by-play and a color voice, and I would literally sit there and just broadcast the games. And one day my dad was like, "Oh, you're actually pretty good. Like you should try this." And I was like, I like it, of course. It's doing sports. It's not easy to make it in this field, but I kind of put my mind to it. I ended up writing for a local paper here in Scarsdale, and that was the start of my media career.
So did you cover like high school games at the time for them or
Yeah. I did high school. I started in women's basketball, girls basketball for high school, writing, and then I did football and baseball as well.
nice? And do you think the writing has helped you in both television, radio, and or any other medium where you're talking or seeing that like has helped you as a maybe a journalist or a broadcaster when you're being able to write and get those game recaps out and stuff like that?
Yes and no. It's very different. TV, you kind of keep the words small. You don't want to say too much or have a mouthful, but obviously in writing you're a little more free. So that makes it tougher, but overall, I mean, there's a lot of similarities between the two. You need to write to do TV, you need to take notes to call a baseball game the same way you need to write and take notes and do everything in writing. So they all intertwine. It's like I don't know if you ever heard when you're like growing up, but you should play a bunch of different sports because they all help each other out. Baseball, you get hand-eye coordination. You can go play football then, and you'll be able to whatever. Every sport kind of plays off each other because they have different things that make you a little bit stronger. And I think that's what's important is each medium teaches you how to do that. Writing is a good one to start with because you kind of learn the ins and outs of how to write sports. And then from writing sports, you can talk sports pretty easily because you're already writing it. So now you can just read your writing, you know? And that translates to radio, which is that free openness of you're not writing, you're talking sports, but you're not reading something directly. You're just kind of going with the flow at that point. So they all bounce off each other. Writing definitely a good one to start though, for sure, because it's kind of I think the most like baseline starter one to really make it up, not to talk down writing whatsoever, because it's a great skill to have and is very, very important.
Speaking of writing and more on the news cycle sticking to the present, I know you're starting a new position, everything pretty soon. So are you already like looking ahead at the election, just knowing you're going to have to do a ton of coverage for that? Or how do you anticipate it being a busy fall, basically?
I have no idea because I start September 1st and I'm only working weekdays at the start. I have no idea how long my onboard process is going to take. If it takes 2 months, then we'll probably be past the election. If it takes a month, then it'll be October. And that's when everything will really, really get rolling. So I kind of hope that I'll be able to cover it. I'm going to be in Harrisburg, which is the capital of Pennsylvania. So something big is going to happen there. I hope. And I think it would be a cool experience for sure. I'm not the biggest political person. I've been mainly a sports person my whole 3 years of whatever this career you want to call it is so far at UM. But yeah, I mean, it's seemingly becoming one of the biggest elections in the history of this country. So no, I'm not going to shy away if they, call to the bullpen and I'm the guy they want.
Right. And I know news is more all-encompassing than politics, and a lot of times it's more serious topics and everything. But do you have any like big stuff you like to cover? Like, do you like going out to events, or like whenever there's some crazy situation that happened, what's kind of your favorite thing in news?
I mean, I hope they'll be able to give me some sports stories, if I'm being honest. I don't know. I didn't do all that much news reporting. I kind of only did one real news story, and that was on a mall shutting down. And I mean, it was boring. It was not fun. Um, so I don't want to cover boring stuff. That's the only thing. Kind of know that I'm going to, and I'm gonna cover some rough stuff because local news is very specific. You cover those dark things that happen in those towns near and around you. But yeah, I don't want to do something that's super boring. I know that I will. I know that I will. It's inevitable. But I want to just something exciting, something fun, an event that I can go participate in and do cool stand up, whatever it might be. If it's country fair, throw a ring toss or just something, a little bit fun that I can play around with.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because I know, just as you mentioned, going into like that news position, which I guess will be new really for you, but sports is always like, I feel like at least for guys like us, we make it interesting. But then I do look at, some people doing gigs like, when they're covering a really serious, like let's say there's a wildfires and stuff, and they're like out there on the front lines doing stuff like that. That does seem really cool. So I wasn't sure if, you wanted to get into any of that, but moving forward in television, like how much do you see, yourself trying to stick it out in there? And then do you also see yourself like kind of developing your own brand at all? And just what are your plans like overall in that space?
I have not thought all that far in the future. I try and keep everything very present. So I know, I'm starting this job in a couple months, gonna have to give it everything I have. And it's a 2-year contract. So I'm there for 2 years, basically no matter what. I don't foresee myself leaving the industry. If I, am going through the process and realize I hate it, then hey, I'll have to make a lifestyle change. But I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. It's one of those things, If I could tell you exactly what my timeline is, it's 2 years here, 2 years in a market that's hopefully, top 15, top 20, and then boom, transition to sports, hopefully somewhere big, but try and transition to sports in whatever market I'm in, if possible. Um, I can't tell you that's exactly what my path is going to be because no one knows. And, no path is a straight line, and I'm going to face my ups and downs, my twists and turns, but right now that's what I want to do is I want to start news, want to go to sports and take it from there. But you never know. You gotta do what makes you happy all the time, and I think that's the most important thing that is driving me in the early part of this career.
By the way, like speaking of which, a lot of people, listening might be getting into contracts and everything. And that's one thing I know on the TV side, like a lot of, and our professors are telling us about too, is like a lot of times you're negotiating a contract. So, how did that go for you your first time around? I mean, was there any like stipulations you're looking to get into, or just could you give us a breakdown, I guess, what you can share in terms, I don't know if there's anything that's super like detailed that is not available to share, but any cool parts of the contract negotiation that you learned about?
I mean, I thought it was kind of interesting to get a call and guy be like, "Hey, I'm offering you a contract." That's just like an interesting little thing. Growing up playing sports, I think most of us who start playing a sport think, "Oh, we're going to be a professional athlete one day," and you kind of dream of that until you realize that you're just not good enough. That was me. So that was cool having him call me and be like, "Hey, I have a contract for you." Um, the offer was pretty decent. I was able to negotiate a little bit more money, which that is something that meant a lot to me that they were able to do that. It wasn't a whole crazy amount more, but the fact that they wanted me on their team. And that to me said that I'm going to be a valuable member. That was a very important thing for me was, knowing that I'm not going to show up and just be another guy. I'll be, part of the rotation, part of the team that actually matters and somebody who hopefully we'll have to go out in the field and cover who knows what.
So, coming off that last point and yourself on the TV side and going into this new market, have you reached out already to anybody that's kind of there, and how much are you trying to, I guess, make relationships in the new place that you'll be going?
Not yet. Still have a little bit of time before I actually go out there. Um, but no, not too much yet. I know the news director, assistant news director, of course, but not too many of the personalities just yet.
Nice. And well, the reason I was asking because I know one of the biggest things about just this industry, a lot of people getting into it, be that radio, the announcing, play-by-play, or TV, is you're going to go to like new places all the time, and not going to know literally anybody. So there is a bit of that. And by the way, was that something that, when you went to Miami, did you know anybody going down there, or you just kind of going like, screw it, I'm going to go make all new relationships?
I knew one kid from high school. He's a business kid, so we did not see each other much. I think I actually genuinely saw him more times my senior year than I did the first 3 years of school. Not somebody I was, overly good friends with, but we knew each other growing up for sure.
Right, that makes sense. And like once you got into this new market here in Pennsylvania, have you know anybody in like the UMTV circuit that you keep in touch with and have drawn advice from, like from that have already gone off and gone into television?
Yeah, I mean, I spoke to a few older guys actually. I spoke to Max Trink. I spoke to Jay Shatara, two guys who graduated, 3, 4 years before me, about the industry. They gave me some good pointers. Both of them were in sports. So they gave me some, good pointers about sports and the sports market. Um, but not too much. I think I really want to forge my own path. A lot of people from UM aren't, doing all that much yet, and there really aren't that many in TV like this from the last couple of years, which is, crazy enough thinking about what the program is. But big a couple of professors that I've been in touch with have really helped me out. That was a big thing, was maintaining those relationships. And of course, keeping in touch with people that I was friends with. But, for advice, it was mainly professors, mainly, people who have kind of been through the industry and some older people who I've met and spoke to over the past couple of months.
Nice. And by the way, one thing that I did definitely had on the topic list that meant to get around to, although it flips the subject a little bit, when you're, announcing sports and everything, do you have sports that you found are easier to call and cover versus those that are more difficult? And what's your opinion on that list of difficulty?
Um, I think basketball is the best one. I mean, I love broadcasting basketball. It's so quick, it's fun, it's fast paced. There's a lot of action, there's a lot of excitement. Dialing up the energy at the right times is huge in basketball because teams feed off of momentum and broadcasters feed off momentum as well. I think it allows you to, if you screw up a call on a basket, the other team is already coming back the other way by the time you realize that you tripped over your words. So you got to move on. And I think it's a really good metaphor of life is like you're gonna make mistakes. They are bound to happen. I don't think I went through a basketball game where I was perfect ever. Um, but boom, you move on to the next play. It's over. 2 seconds later, oh, there we go the other way. Oh no, layup, whatever. Oh no, Miami's got the ball. They're coming back the other way. 3-on-2 on the fast break. Here comes Roberts to Williams, whatever it may be. And you just boom, then you're back in the middle of the flow of things. I think baseball's fun because you have open time to talk and joke and smile and make it a lot more personal. And football is hard. Football is just straight up tough to do. It's tough to see the players, tough to see the numbers. I have a really hard time keeping track of the ball with the binoculars. I will like look a little bit too far and then I'm just out of the play, and that is not going to make anything easier. So I mean, basketball is my favorite one for sure. I've had the most good experiences with basketball. All my best broadcasting experiences were with basketball, besides maybe one. Um, and yeah, love doing them all. Don't get me wrong. I love doing football. Happy to call a football game if they called me and said we need you to come back. But it's the 100% the toughest one. You got to be, right, especially from where we sit up in the corner and in Hard Rock where we're just nowhere near the middle of the field. There's nothing even whatsoever. We have had no advantage at all in that spot. That definitely does not make anything easier.
Yeah, I've heard it's really tough, by the way, to do. For those that aren't familiar, when you're in Hard Rock Stadium, the radio booth, you're kind of off to the side or like at a diagonal angle to the field. And I think it's because of it used to be, be a multi-purpose stadium for baseball, and that was like towards home plate. So you're really at an angle, and that's kind of the tough thing. And also on our side, because I've talked with some other guys that that have been through this podcast, for example, some people, I think it was Michael Potter, I want to say that mentioned like, a lot of guys will, you might be the viewer at home watching like an NFL thing and think it's crazy that an announcer saw some play. But a lot of times, like at those higher levels on television, you're getting like so many different eyes other than yourself,
They got
getting,
spotters, they've
yeah,
got a ton of monitors. We have two people, a tiny TV that's not even delayed enough for us to really see the play, and that's about it. And a scorecard.
yeah, and so to building off that point, kind of if you're starting out and you're like a high school level or something, and or like at a lower college level, and you don't have that either one budget or two, you're like in a difficult broadcasting situation. You got to understand like you don't always have all the gears that some of the upper levels have worked their way to get. But in saying that, and especially off your point in basketball, where it's like you can make a mistake and then it's got to be made up like anyways as the play goes on. How do you sit down and critique yourself and how much time like have you taken to do that and how much also opinions did you get from other people like in trying to improve on the broadcasting side?
Once I realized I wanted to do TV, I didn't really critique myself as much as I used to. I would always go to Brendan, who was, for those who will not know Brendan, our old sports director. When I was a sophomore, I'd go to him. We'd listen to 10 minutes of a basketball game or a baseball game, whatever it may be, and he gave me little points, and then boom, you take those to the next game. Towards the end, I would just go back and like if I knew I had a cool call, I would listen to it again. Like I'd listen to, a few minutes of a fourth quarter maybe. But no, I wasn't really critiquing myself all that much towards the end part. I do it a lot in TV. Any little stutter, I get upset with myself just because there's, it's so much less time. You can make a mistake in the first quarter of a basketball game and no one will think about it because you called 100 other points and X turnovers and rebounds and assists, whatever it may be. And you talk about all that. But in TV, I am very hard on myself. If it's not perfect, it's not good to me. Which maybe not the best mentality to have all the time. There's obviously good to take away from everything, but I definitely am hard. I want it to be as perfect as possible so that it can be shown to the world and nobody can say anything about it negative.
Yeah, I mean that's I think overall it's a good mindset in terms of what you can build. You can always improve, but how would you, I guess, improve on your television work? And there are things you're looking for when you look back that you want to improve on because it's really difficult. Like when you have to go film something to like everything is completely different covering one event to the next. So how do you even like generalize your tactics enough to know what you need to do better for the next time and that situation is going to come up again versus like let's say you're at one event, like maybe the thing you need to improve on only happened then. Like how do you kind of make it so you can improve on it for the next time, no matter what your covering is?
I mean, you just every time you see something, you experience it. I talk about this all the time in life. Experience is everything in broadcasting, especially, but in any aspect of life. The more you experience, the more you'll know. The more you'll understand how to deal with the situation the next time it comes. So, I say this, I think every time I call a baseball game. Cal is the first one. Cal Freeman, who was with Kansas City Monarchs, is the first one who would always say this: is you every time you go to a baseball game, you're gonna see something you've never seen before. It's basically inevitable and you just gotta react to it. It's a lot about reacting and reacting the right way. I don't really think there's, any right answer to it. I just think when you see something, now you've experienced it, now you know how to deal with it the next time. If you screw up the call, then okay, I've seen this. I know what this means. I know what this does. Boom. Now I'm not going to be as confused. I think The bat flip. Remember the kid on Florida? He bat flipped and got tossed. I think it was the first game, and I had no idea that was a rule. I just knew it had happened in a game a little while back, and I was like, "Oh, like I think some kid from Texas A&M or Tennessee did that." And I was completely, I mean, I was wrong. It was kind of guessing, which is not good. But that moment, now I was able to, okay, I realized it the next time it happened. Oh, he got tossed because he flipped the bat too high. This is exactly what happened against Miami when Florida came here, and Shellnut threw his bat and got tossed out of the game. It's experience. Having experienced it once, I was able to, okay, I see that now. I know what that is. Boom, experience. That goes right into the broadcast. This is what I can compare it to, so you can get a better feel of what just happened and why it happened, and that it's not something brand new that I've never seen before. Because if usually if the broadcaster is shocked by something, the viewer will probably be shocked by something also, or the listener will be shocked by something also.
Right. It definitely, it takes a lot of experience because there are so many different specific like circumstances that can occur. And then even then I have no idea what's going to happen next in some of these games. So we still await those stories to come. But, getting down to the last few things, do you have any tactics for being alone on a broadcast versus being with a color commentator? And, how do you manage that?
Don't try and be your own color guy. That is the biggest thing. If you try and take on both roles, you're just going to make life tougher for yourself. Analyze the game when the analysis needs to be given. So, if you're calling a basketball game by yourself, this goes for anybody who is going to go to Miami and call for WVUM. You're going to go on the road with the women's basketball team, you're going to be by yourself. Don't try and put too many words into your mouth. Watch the game, broadcast the game the same way you would. Maybe add a little bit more when there's silence. You don't want 30 seconds of silence. But if there's 10, 15, then you bring in a point. Oh, she looks like she's been able to get to the rim better than she was last game, attacking the defense, cutting through, whatever it may be. Or this person has done a good job on the offensive glass. 8 total rebounds, 4 of them were on the offensive end. Don't try and do that too much, because the more you do that, you're just going to put more words in your mouth, and you're just going to end up flipping through your own words. It's not going to sound good. It's not going to sound authentic. So, don't be worried about being by yourself. It's not as hard as it seems. It's a little daunting for sure, but I wouldn't say it's overly difficult. It's just all about timing. Don't leave too much dead air, but also at the same time, don't try and overexert yourself as the broadcaster, because you still need to paint a simple picture of what's going on.
Yeah, it can be more intimidating to be alone like at first. And it's funny though, because I think like, I mean, a lot of college students, I feel like if you're at a college program, I know you're typically with somebody, and then certainly on the network side, you've got other commentators, but there's a lot of situations, minor league baseball and those, like for example, or being on the road with the women's team, you're alone, or even basketball guys like the D1 level will be alone. So it's a whole thing to manage. And, off that point, are any sports or heck, even news subjects that you're not covering now that you'd want to, announce or cover in the future?
I could definitely see myself wanting to do basketball in the future. In any capacity. I love talking about basketball. I love playing basketball. Just being around basketball. And honestly, baseball is still my favorite sport. But I think I like baseball more as just a pure fan who doesn't have to worry about anything. Um, Football too. I love talking about football. I could sit there and talk about football for a million hours on end and give opinions and things like that. I'm open to whatever it may be. I don't think I have one direct avenue of a sport that I want to broadcast or cover in any capacity too much. But there are ones that I would like to do events with. If there's cool parks that have big basketball events outdoors in Pennsylvania, I would absolutely love to cover it and be a part of that environment and that atmosphere.
That would be, I know football and basketball are definitely two of my favorites as well, and a lot of other people's. And then just lastly, do you have any big goal kind of over the next year? And then secondly, how can people, find you on the television side and what you have coming up starting in September?
Yeah, so big goal for the next year, not anything crazy. I'm starting as an MMJ. I would like to at least, fill an anchor, a weekend anchor, hopefully by the end of this contract. Um, because that I love anchoring. I think it's super cool. Just like an enjoyable experience to sit in that studio and just talk to the TV, have a conversation with the TV, no matter what it's going to be. Some subjects obviously much tougher than others, some are much lighter than others, but I think that is, if I could give you a true goal for the end of my first contract, that's probably what it would be. How can you find me? CBS 21 in Harrisburg. You can look it up on the internet, CBS 21, Harrisburg, PA. Click the link, watch live, and hopefully you'll see me throughout the different shows. I don't actually know what shifts I'm on. I just know right now that I'm starting on weekdays. So don't watch on the weekends. You won't see me yet, but you can find me there. Obviously, Twitter, Instagram, all that fun stuff. But yeah, no, it'll be CBS 21, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I forget what the exact website is. I have it somewhere. But yeah, that's where I'll be for the next 2 years. So hopefully get some people to come check it out.
Yeah, well, that'll be awesome. And again, Andrew Klein, just thank him so much for joining us. Give us so much insight on play-by-play and then also the television side. And I think more than any other guest on that and telling us exactly what are the good things to be looking for stories and everything for anyone out there getting into this space. But really appreciate it, Andrew. Thank you for stopping by.